Welcome to Fort Worth 148's podcast, where we meet to discuss Masonic topics and strive to build value in the Brotherhood. The opinions and statements of the participants do not represent any positions or stance of any Grand Lodge or Lodge and are solely the viewpoints of the participants.
Welcome back to the Fort Worth 148 podcast. We're glad to have you here. My name is Evve Kirkendall. I'm a past master of 148 and the chaplain.
I am Brandy Patton, current Worshipful Master of 148.
And this is Cody Cox, the current Senior Warden of Fort Worth 148.
And we also happen to have a guest with us today that we are happy to invite. We've been trying to get him on the podcast now for a couple of episodes, and his schedule finally met up with ours. And go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Zachary Davis, a newly raised Master Mason for Lodge 148.
Not just a newly raised Master Mason, the most newly raised Master Mason in Fort Worth 148. For some context, you were also the candidate for the outdoor degree that was recently done, and we all got to participate in. The amazing degree that we got to visit. How was that experience for you as the candidate?
It was an amazing experience. I had built up in my mind what it would be like even before I knew I was doing the outdoor degree. And it did not disappoint. I'm still a little bewildered by it all.
It's been literally like, what, a week and a half?
Something like that.
Yeah.
A week, I think.
Yeah, it's been about a week. When we say new, you were a baby Master Mason.
Yeah. And I was talking with one of the lodge members there, and it's the Kenneth Word Memorial Mountaintop degree for Iredell. And I was speaking with his grandson, who was part of the degree. And he was explaining about the history of it, and it was going back to, I think in the 60s is when they actually started doing that. And Kenneth Word really took charge of it, and I guess he was the leader of it for a long time until he passed, and now it's the Kenneth Word Memorial degree.
That's awesome. I really like it when lodges do stuff like that, when they name things after important members of their lodges. We at Fort Worth 148 have done it a couple of times. It's nice to hear that other lodges like Iredell are doing things like that to memorialize folks.
Yeah.
In other words, he's dropping hints. He wants like the Evve Kirkendall Memorial.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
The chaplain badge is the Evve badge.
That's right.
Or Jewel. Sorry, Jewel.
That's gross. That's just gross. So as the newest Master Mason, tell us what your journey was like, because we all know it because we're all part of your lodge, but some of our listeners might not know how did you get to be chosen to be the candidate? What has your experience been? How long did you move from being a prospective member to being a member, then all the things that went on from there?
I guess it's been nearly 2 years since I actually got my first candidate night visit. And that was in November, 23, correct? Yes, November of 23. And from there, it was, yes, please come visit and we'll do a little interview, tell you about it. And then from there, it's, oh, you're welcome to come to dinner next week. And then from there, you're welcome to come talk with us and hang out around the table next week. And then it was like, you could keep coming back until finally, about 6 months later, got my petition. And by that time, I had already gotten to know most of the guys, at least visited with them a little bit. So it felt like it was just a natural progression. I wasn't really nervous so much about getting my signatures or anything. I think it was very easy. I think everybody that was there the day I got my petition was just like, oh yeah, let's do it. I'll sign for you. And
yeah, because by that time, many people know that at 148, we don't just give people petitions when they come to us for the first time. We actually wait. It averages 90 days to 6 months, depending on how often someone's attending. Then they get and by that time, the goal is that our membership should know you well enough where when you go up and ask them, it's not going to be like you're asking a perfect stranger. You should know everyone who's signing your
and I think also one thing that we've talked about at 148 is we want, when we give the petition to somebody, we want the person to feel like they've accomplished something. Can you speak to that kind of experience?
Yes, I actually did feel that way. It was like, oh, I have been coming to the dinners before the stated meetings for 6 months, and then also just every other Monday or sometimes every next Monday, just going and talking with everybody. So when I finally got the petition, I was like, it felt I've done something here. I've stuck out some time. Is that the right way to think of it? Like I have put in some time and I've built some relationships, at least got started on it enough that these guys would like me to be a representative of their lodge by joining their lodge. So they like me enough to want to be a brother with me. So by that point, I was ready to experience the initiation. So it happened pretty quick. I think it was I turned in my petition and it was voted on the night that I turned it in. I believe it was at stated meeting that night. And then the next month I was initiated, and that was in
See
July.
what happens when you have a secretary that's on top of things. I'm just saying that. I don't know who the secretary was at that time. But.
Are you vying for the 148 Memorial Secretary's desk now?
You know what? I want a
Cody
brass.
Cox.
I want a brass plaque on that one. Okay.
I promised you he was bald and had a beard.
That's a prerequisite for being.
If
a member
only
of
this were on
148.
YouTube right
I
now,
know.
you would see that everyone in
see-
here except for Zach is bald and bearded.
Exactly.
I'm the newest one though, so.
You're gonna have to grow a beard though. You realize?
One of us.
One of us. That's funny. So yeah, so how did you end up getting to be the candidate for the Hilltop degree? Share that story a little bit, because it's even like I've heard of the Hilltop degree a couple of times, but I never got to see the process up close about how it gets chosen. And so tell us a little bit about that.
One of my friends that's from a different lodge, he sent me a screenshot basically of where Kevin Moss, one of the brothers at Iredell Lodge, was asking, is there any candidate ready to be raised that would like to participate in the degree? At that point, I was not quite ready for my proficiency yet, but I came to lodge and I asked Brandy and I asked a couple other guys, what would you think if I tried to do this? I didn't want it to be weird for our lodge, and I didn't want to ask without making sure that it was something that would be okay. And from there, I messaged Kevin Moss, and then the next day he answered me and he's, let me make sure no one else had any interest. And then he said, okay, you're the guy. So I learned my proficiency. I think I did it 2 weeks after that date. I did the proficiency. And
Yeah, you're working really hard on your proficiency there at the end, because I know that
Yeah.
you had a deadline hanging
Yeah.
up over your head.
Yeah. Me and Colin really pushed to do it, but it was great. I actually liked having the deadline. I think that made it even more satisfying whenever I got to do it. I was like, wow, I actually accomplished this, and I guess the ceremony was like the reward for doing that.
Yeah, and we at 148, obviously we do our degrees in a temple and in downtown Fort Worth, but being able to see such a quality degree being put on outdoors, and it wasn't a full moon, but it was a very near full moon.
Day after a red moon.
Yeah,
Or blood
it
moon.
was, and it was clear and a million outside. The stars were out. There could not have been a more auspicious event for a Master Mason's degree than what we experienced.
Yes, the stars. That was something. At one point, at one point in the degree, I come to and I'm staring at the sky, and it was just stars all around, and I was like rubbing my eyes a little bit. Where am I at right now?
It can be a little
Yeah,
disorienting,
I was
as we all know.
really disoriented, but I was just staring at the stars and like thinking, wow, this is incredible. It's very special. I knew it was going to be special even if it was at the temple, but I think it was just an amazing thing to get to be part of.
And if you've never been to this particular location for this outdoor degree, it is really rather high up in the kind of,
And out
as far as
It's out there.
Texas is concerned. It's not like a mountain or anything, but it's definitely atop of a very large hill.
North Texas mountain.
Yeah, it would what we would
1,000
call it.
feet,
We would
probably.
call it a mountain, and it overlooks an amazing view that you can see miles and miles, and surrounded by some trees. But then the road leading up to it is a really out there kind of place.
Yeah.
It took us. We were driving around for a good 10 minutes looking for the road to get
Yeah.
up there.
Yeah.
And it is definitely out there. We did not have to worry about anybody, sneaking up on us or anything. It was an impressive
I
venue.
think that was part of the mystique of it, was when we were driving, you exit the highway, and there was signs that had
It had the square compasses and a little arrow.
So it was like, oh man, we're
Yeah, we're either
following a
going
map right now or something.
Yeah, we're either going to a movie set for a Yellowstone adjacent project, or we're going to some sort of Master Mason thing. So we didn't know which, and luckily it was a Master Mason's degree. So there is that.
Now, Zach, I have a question for you. We've got listeners on here that are different. They're at different lodges and things like that. As a newly minted Master Mason, can you share with our listeners what kind of kept you motivated to get through your EA, through your fellowcraft to become a Master Mason, and then what are the things that you're looking forward to, and how are you keeping yourself motivated now that you have become a full Master Mason with voting privileges and things like that?
I really think from, I guess maybe even the night of initiation, just getting to join everybody, even afterward, and just getting to talk with everybody that was there, it was encouraging to keep moving forward. These are now your brothers, and they want you to keep moving forward and to get the most out of Masonry that you can for yourself. And I think that's something that I realized was that Masonry, you get out of it what you dedicate to it, what you actually put into it. Like reading from different authors, studying the monitor, anything like that. It's like you put in the work and you learn your proficiency, and whoever you're working with, you go over the symbolism of your proficiency while you're learning it, and you're basically giving yourself your Masonic education as you're learning your proficiency. And I think what kept me wanting to keep moving forward was just learning more about it at that point. And then after the first proficiency was done, I was like, wow, that was a very long process of learning that. But then the next one, I was like, wow, that one wasn't so bad. I was able to do it in,
Didn't you get the triple whammy?
yeah, short
Right,
time.
exactly.
But I think what really keeps me wanting to do it is just learning more about it and getting to be around people that are really into it. It's like, I never knew I would have liked Masonry before I sent that first email about the coming to visit the lodge. And it was something totally different than what I expected. And it's much better. It's real. It's more of a real thing. And I was going off of the National Treasure kind of expectations, or whatever the movie expectations are. But yeah, it's very real, and it is what you put into it is what you get out of it. And I feel like I've heard the saying that you can study things even from the fellowcraft degree all your whole life and never know all of it. So it's just things like that just keep me motivated to learn more about it.
Yeah, you can definitely, I think, we often characterize it as drinking from a fire hose.
Absolutely.
Because it's just the fellowcraft degree itself, like you were saying, can be very, very rich with information, to say the least, and to say nothing about the master's degree, which is, I think, an entirely different subject altogether. But
Yeah.
what is Cody is wondering, and I'm kind of wondering it too. So what's next? Are you planning on joining some appendant bodies? Are you going to hang out in the Blue Lodge for a little bit? What's gonna be the next thing for you on your Masonic journey, do you think? And if there's nothing on the horizon, that's an okay answer
Yeah, that's
too.
okay. It doesn't have to be, I'm going on the line.
We don't expect you to run for the Grand South next year.
Since I started, I've really tried to keep myself restricted from getting any spoilers on anything I've been reading. So now it's like, finally I get to move forward on reading more of the Monitor and reading more books that are related to Masonry, and not knowing what it all means yet, because it's still a journey, but at least getting to be exposed to it. I don't know if I will join any appendant bodies anytime soon, but I am looking forward to getting more participation in things in Blue Lodge, because that was something I have been looking forward to for almost a year now, was getting to even something as simple as voting. I finally got to do that.
Yeah, your first night of being a
Yeah.
Master Mason, you got to vote on your first next candidate. So.
Yeah.
Plural.
Plural.
Yeah. It felt great. I was like, oh, I'm part of the group now. have a voice in there. I think probably maybe a year down the line, I might think of appendant bodies. I have lots of friends in that, so I think for right now, I just want to learn more and to participate in Blue Lodge, and I guess
He
volunteer
just wants to,
maybe.
He just wants
I don't
to
know.
bask in the newness.
Basket.
Yeah.
And that's a great idea too. I think that in my experience, all too often, new Master Masons can overindulge in appendant bodies. And I think the appendant bodies are great. People should join them if they feel compelled to. I transparently have never joined any appendant bodies, and I feel very fulfilled by Freemasonry as a result of it. But I also know that there are a lot of people out there that really get a lot out of the appendant bodies, and I think it's wise to sit back a little bit and think a little bit before you dive headfirst into the waters that are appendant bodies.
It's hard to make a decision on that right now because it's still new to me, and I'm still trying to comprehend everything that happened at the ritual, the raising ceremony. So
Yeah, it's definitely a transformative moment. I've often told people that I can define my personal life between pre-Master Mason and post-Master Mason, and that it's after your Master Mason's degree, the world is painted in different colors. And I felt, and it's very hard for people who've never been through that kind of transformative experience to understand it, but everyone in the room here is nodding yes. It's a very transformative experience if done right with the right attitude going into it, that it can really define who you are for the rest of your life. And it sounds like that your experience in Freemasonry, coupled with the auspicious occasion upon which you were made a Master Mason, really has lended itself to your being a little circumspect about that.
yeah, I don't even have a right comment after that. I was just thinking about the degree itself. I had been thinking of it in my mind what it would be like, but then it being the outdoors degree on top of that, I'm still just blown away by it. And also by the members of that lodge, just how welcoming they were. And they were all excited, and you could tell they all really enjoy doing that degree. And like they are really into that. So it was.
Yeah, we as visitors to this event that we helped put it on, of course, in terms of many of our members volunteered to be parts in your degree. But even camaraderie that we experienced as a part of doing that, it really epitomized everything that I think Freemasonry stands for, is this ability for lodges to come together and be unified in the bringing of a new Master Mason to the fold.
Absolutely. We were out there with brothers that I had never met, but we were also out there with brothers that I know very well that are here from the Fort Worth Metroplex that were down there for the degree as well. And some of the guys that were there, again, to me, can be Masonic heavy hitters. And so the people that were at your degree, you had some pretty awesome folks.
Yeah, a
there.
couple of DDGMs, instructors.
The Right
work.
Worshipful Jimmy Henley was there.
Yeah, it was a great event. So, welcome to the podcast. We're so glad to have you, and thanks for sharing your story with us. We're going to be diving in now. Zach is going to continue on, and he's going to share the new Master Mason's perspective.
He looks a little nervous right
Yeah,
now.
he
but
looks a
it's
little
okay.
nervous.
That's just how I look.
That's just my face. So we're going to go into our first topic, what we're going to be calling the bullpen discussion. This is going to be that part of the show where we are just talking about an issue that's been bubbling around in our heads, and we're going to rattle it around. And hopefully, if you have any thoughts as listeners, feel free to comment on whatever platform you're listening from. Leave us a comment, send us an email, do all the things. And so what we wanted to talk about today is the idea of prayer in Masonry and how we approach it. Should we be approaching it from a perspective of a certain affiliation? Meaning, should the chaplain or whomever is doing the leading of the prayer, should they pray in the name of their faith and in the tradition of their faith? Or is it more appropriate for them to do a more generic prayer that can be superimposed by anyone's faith? I mean, and I think as the chaplain, it's always my passion to make sure that when I'm praying, as a person who's offering up the prayers before our meetings and before meals, that I'm doing it in a way that meets the spirit of Freemasonry. But I also have these questions about, should I be praying in a more a tradition kind of way, or should I farm out the work to other people? So what are y'all's perspective on this? Let's mull it over in the bullpen.
When we started discussing this, I'm the type of person I want to go and find some kind of nugget that I can hold on to. So I went into Grand Lodge Law, and if you're not doing this, dear listeners, you should be doing this. Every so often, when something comes up, go into Grand Lodge Law and see what's there, because that's something that we're charged to do. And so this comes from the Charges of a Freemason. This is Division 2, and this is going to be Section 1. This deals with concerning God and religion. I'm not going to read the entire thing, but the stuff that kind of applies here is it says, that is, to be good men and true, or men of honor and honesty, by whatever denominations or persuasions they may be distinguished, whereby Masonry becomes the center of union and the means of conciliating true friendship among persons that must have remained at a perpetual distance. And in this little charge here, it's the idea of, yes, we understand that you are going to become part of some sort of church in your country or in wherever you're at. There's that idea of that, but that Masonry should be the middle ground where we all come together, regardless of whatever church affiliation or religious affiliation. Underneath that, in my law book, there's a Grand Master's decision that came out in 1973 that was a question, and if you're listening to this and you remember what this is regards to, please let us know. The question was, can a constituent lodge accept and co-sign a Christian declaration form so a brother can join a certain denomination church in his community? The decision on this was no. Regarding religion, Masonry is non-sectarian. And that absolutely applies to what we're talking about right here. The idea that when we are practicing Masonry, we are not practicing a religion, we are practicing the brotherhood. In my opinion, when it says it's non-sectarian, even though I am a Christian, when I'm praying a prayer at lodge, I need to be circumspect in the idea that I may have a brother that's a Muslim, I may have a brother that's a Jew, I may have a brother who is Hindu or something like that. And so by saying in the name of Jesus, I am taking something that's sacred and turning it sectarian. Anybody else want to join in on that one?
You're taking away their ability to join in on their prayer when you say it that way.
I tend to agree with that. As the lone clergy member in the room, I do have this desire to pray in my own tradition, and as a Christian clergy member, that is my way. But I also recognize what Cody's pointing out here, that this is a non-sectarian organization, very similar to whenever I was a kid, I was a Boy Scout. And that was essentially the same rules that we had as a Boy Scout, that we were a non-sectarian organization. We just could not be atheists. And everyone, when we prayed, we recognized that we needed to be as inclusive with our language as possible. And I think at that point in time, we didn't have language for that. The Boy Scouts didn't really provide it for us. But the interesting thing here is that Freemasonry provides us the language to include everyone by using God language that has the great architect of the universe, the grand geometrician of the universe, the creator, whatever kind of generic God language that we want to use, we still have that ability that is prescribed, and it doesn't feel awkward. We're not Cody isn't going to suddenly feel weird that I'm referring to God as the great architect, because Cody's tradition, whatever that tradition might be, can still superimpose that idea of that architect figure on whatever faith tradition he's a part of. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about it. What about you, Zach? What are your thoughts on this? Again, the new Master Mason, how do you feel about? Is this something you've given a lot of thought to? How are you feeling about it?
I agree with how Brandy put it. If you assume what their actual religious affiliation might be, and you are praying in that way, you might be like hijacking someone else's experience, putting
That's great language.
your own, just taking it over and putting your own thoughts in there.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. The idea that we need to be considerate enough not to hijack the Masonic experience of another person. Because I think about whenever we have dinner or what have you, we always pray before we eat. And I think about What if I accidentally pray the wrong way and suddenly my Jewish colleagues and brothers or my Muslim brothers are not able to feel as connected to the brotherhood as my Christian brothers could? I feel like it's definitely not something that I would want to make them feel like that. So I like that language you've used.
Yeah,
I actually wrote that down.
I feel like if you are, it's almost as if you're inviting them, but also pushing them aside a little bit. It has to be this way instead of the things that you said from the beginning, that it is not about religion. And then you do make it about religion after you get involved.
And I guess one of the things that I posed this to the group as we were brainstorming this is, how uncomfortable would certain of our brothers in Masonry feel if one of the non-Christian members of our lodges were praying in their specific tradition and including us in on that conversation? How would we feel about it if we felt like our prayers were being co-opted by another faith tradition that wasn't ours? Would I feel uncomfortable? I don't know if I would personally, but I know that there are a lot of brothers out there who feel very strongly about that they would probably feel like their faith opportunity was being hijacked before a meal or before a degree or something like that. So I think that's also the opposite side of that. How would we feel if we were the person whose faith was not being...
And I think with this one too, we should also recognize the fact that I am sure that there are times myself that if I were saying a prayer in lodge or something like that, it's somewhat ingrained in me that when I'm praying to say in Jesus' name or something like that may be a mistake, or I did it just because it's like natural for me to do that. What we're doing here is maybe challenging folks to start thinking about that. We know that most people that are doing it are not doing it out of malicious intent or anything like that. But we're putting out this talking point to, again, say in our fraternity, we're challenging each other to go, hey, when you say it in this particular way, are you practicing Masonry for real?
That's
those types of things. Again, we are by no means telling people that they're absolutely wrong or they're doing it on purpose, because I've done it.
Absolutely.
And so I have to challenge myself. If I'm going to say a prayer in lodge, there's always that little voice in the back of my head that's, remember, say, the grand architect of the universe.
I've planned my prayers out in advance because of that, because I don't want to be the guy who does that. But I also want to say that I've been part of people praying in ways that I didn't necessarily personally, would I have practiced it that way? Probably not. Did I run up to that person and finger wag at them or say, you're praying wrong? Or
that's right.
I would never do that. And this is not, I hope that this conversation to our listeners is not being taken as that we're suddenly prescribing on high what should be going on in lodges or how a lodge should be doing their prayers. I just think that this is a
consider
great
it quiet counsel.
Yeah, I think it's worthy to reflect on it.
Absolutely.
It's a worthy moment of reflection. But interestingly enough, this segues, I think, really nicely into the main topic today. So our bullpen discussion was a little bit about prayers and how we talk about God and those sorts of things. But
the use of words.
The use of words has become a topic in our society. Not that it hasn't been, but I feel like, let's put this in context. There's been a lot of drama going on in our country over the last week. We're recording in a certain period of time. This is going to be released probably longer after the events that have just happened are. There's going to be a little
things
more
will
distance.
subside, maybe just
Some of the tensions will subside, and our purpose is not to get involved in those sorts of discussions because we actually had this kind of idea for this topic beforehand. But I think that some people could think that we're talking specifically about contemporaneous issues that are going on. But we really wanted to have this discussion about the nature of free speech in Freemasonry, because there's a certain amount of our ability to say whatever comes to our mind publicly and on social media that we give up as Freemasons, and willingly, because we recognize that we have to circumscribe our desires and make better choices about how we represent ourselves and how we are representing ourselves as members of Freemasonry when we have square and compasses on the back of our car? Do we go driving like a complete's horse's backside through traffic, knowing that the person who we just cut off sees that we're a Freemason and what that says about who we are? The things we put on social media are equally important in influencing those sorts of impressions of Freemasonry.
Let's even go further. I think for our listeners that might not be here in the United States and other places, or other places around the world, Americans are known for our voracious use of the freedom of speech.
No.
I know.
You
That's-
don't think that people across the pond know that we're
Listen,
a little overly opinionated?
I know you're clutching the pearls on that one, but what I mean to say is that in the United States, as an American, it's something that's so ingrained in us is this freedom of speech. But as I have grown older, I come to realize, and especially as I've been in Freemasonry, that with the right to freedom of speech also comes a responsibility with that. And so I'm pretty sure that we're talking along the lines of, yes, exercise freedom of speech, but what are the responsibilities that you have not only as a man, but also as a Mason?
Absolutely. And I think that one of the things that I think gets tossed around a lot, and I think it's worthy of repeating here, is that we understand that freedom of speech is the freedom from the government coming in and saying, you can't say that, right, versus the freedom from consequences of saying something atrocious and awful. And even though the government might say that you can say something gross and atrocious, you still might get fired from your job, as we've discovered in the past 5 or 10 years, where people say or do something on social media that ends up having some very profound consequences for them in other aspects of their life. Framing the conversation like that, I think that one of the things that was bubbling around in our head is how much control does Freemasonry and our leaders at the Grand Lodge, how much control do they actually have over what we can and cannot say? And Cody, being the little law book bug that he is, has literally the book opened right here to us, and he's got some pages flagged for us that I think are going to be important in guiding this conversation. Share with us, Cody, a little bit about what you discovered in digging into Grand Lodge law, about what the law book has to say about this.
Absolutely. And by the way, just for those of you that are listening here in the Grand Jurisdiction of Texas, if you're a current DDGM or it's going to be in your future somewhere, speaking as a former DDGM, do not be surprised that when you are put into that position, that the people that are in your jurisdiction believe that the law book from the front cover to the back cover, because it's happened to me, and I've had to really dig into this law book and stuff like that.
560 pages.
Yeah, it's a big one. Okay, where I looked at the powers of the Grand Master. Of course, there's powers that are enumerated to him in the law book regarding what he can do during grand communication, and then there's also powers that are enumerated to him in Title V, which is when we're talking about Masonic violations and things like that. So if you want to go and look at that's Article 501, that'll do that there. But the ones that I think will help with this one, so in Article 501, it basically says that the Grand Master, when the Grand Lodge is not in session, it says he shall have full power and authority to order filing of allegations in particular cases, to order disciplinary procedures in particular cases. And the way that is framed there is when it comes to those Masonic violations. So if you've never looked at Title V, I would suggest that you do that, because there's a lot of stuff. Because again, as a Master Mason, you are bound by what's in the law book. And so you can't do stuff and go, I didn't know, when you have a law book to go to. So in the law book, if you go to Article 508, this is where it says certain other Masonic disciplinary violations. The very first two are dealing exactly with what we're talking about today. So the Article 508, number 1, to traduce, slander, libel, or falsely accuse any person. Notice that doesn't say Master Mason, that says any person. It can be the wife of a Master Mason, it can be somebody in public. And then number 2, to make false allegations or utter any word or statement, either orally, in writing or otherwise, or to commit any act or engage in any activities or conduct calculated to bring reproach upon this Grand Lodge or any of its officers, institutions, agencies, or subordinate lodges, or officers thereof, or which is calculated to bring discredit or disgrace on Masonry, or which is reasonably calculated to reflect unfavorably on the good name of Masonry. I think this sets the floor, not the ceiling, to our conversation.
One of the things that I was brought up this, I will transparently say I'm the one who wanted to talk about this because I feel like it's been in our society for a while now. And one of the things that I'm always concerned about is the overreach of power. And whenever I read through this particular part of the law book, and I shared this with Cody and Brandy and Zach earlier, that it really surprised me how broad the scope of that particular ability of the Grand Master to regulate those kinds of things suddenly is, and in how, I'm not speaking of anyone specifically, I'm thinking here purely theoretically, the ability of someone to misuse such a very broad power, because those words that are being used there, as we all know, are extraordinarily vague and can be interpreted in a host of ways that could be leveraged against people for saying many things that we all might agree are not problematic at all. I think we all agree on the other side of that coin, though, that there are plenty of times whenever we think that Freemasons should be careful about what they say and that they are speaking, whether they know it or not, on behalf of the fraternity. When you post something and you've got a square and compass on your social media photo, you're speaking, whether officially or unofficially, with the weight of Freemasonry behind you. So if you say something stupid, then you are saying something stupid that makes all of us look stupid. So on the one hand, it makes me nervous for the power to be that broad and sweeping. But on the other hand, I also acknowledge that it's important that the Grand Master have some sort of broad power to make sure and to take action against people who are saying stupid stuff.
And we can also look at it this way, and I'm sure that, again, we have two past masters, we have a current master in here. The idea that the Grand Master has particular powers, just like the master of the lodge has particular powers. So the three of us, at some point, either currently or past, had this kind of power within our own lodges to regulate or at least be a gatekeeper for what the members of our lodge were saying, either when it was brought to our attention or right there when we're standing there in lodge or something like that. So I would say that I'm coming to this going, okay, I know what it was like as master of the lodge, and that there were times that I needed to make sure that if I knew that a member of my lodge was saying something that was going to make our lodge look bad, that it was my duty as the elected official to go to them and say, hey, I need you to not do this because of what you could potentially be doing to the lodge. So I can see where the Grand Master is just as much responsible for all of us that are in the state. So I can see that. I do, though, want to bring into the conversation the idea of, if we have elected officials that are responsible for this, or let's be quite honest, when we elect them, we're giving them these enumerated powers, then that also falls back on us as voting members to make sure that the people that we're electing into these positions don't take that gavel and wield it with an iron fist. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I will also say, I think it's important that I say this out loud. When I was the master of the lodge, there was a time whenever I felt compelled to, I didn't have to, but I felt compelled to, in the interest of our lodge, go to a member and say, hey, you've posted something on social media that I think is potentially problematic. Would you please remove it? And that brother was very kind and took it in the spirit that I meant it to be taken. At least I think that they did from our conversations afterwards. He and I have great friendship. We are still close friends. And it wasn't anything obtuse or difficult. But I also think personally about that, how I have wielded that whenever I went to him and said, hey, would you mind taking that off social media? Because that is me wielding a power that is also enumerated to, in a much broader sense, to our Grand Master. And
Hey, Master Mason, you whisper wise counsel. That's what we're supposed to do.
that's true. We can whisper wise counsel, but in this case, as the Worshipful Master and as the Grand Master of Masons, there is a certain amount of being able to compel behavior by threatening
Right.
to either suspend or expel or bring charges. There are mechanisms that the Master and the Grand Master have that exceed that of just a brother going and whispering
Well, and
wise
again,
counsel.
the reason that you have that is because you were elected by your brethren to be the superintendent of the craft during that particular time.
Absolutely.
So when you are voted into that position, you're getting like the stamp of approval from everyone to go, okay, we trust you to do X, Y, and Z. You are now the superintendent of it, so that the lodges, or I should say the individual members, aren't getting lost in the minutia of all that kind of stuff. That's your job. That's what you're supposed to do.
Absolutely. And I really, when we were talking about this earlier, that's one of the things that I really appreciated about this conversation is that we have the ability and the responsibility of making sure that when we choose a brother, that we're not micromanaging the choice, that we are electing people with the ability, the intellect, the logic, the compassion, the empathy, but also the spirit of fairness and justice to administer our laws in the spirit that they were meant to be administered, not punitively, not with selfish intention or where other motives, but true Masonic integrity behind it. And I think that, by and large, by the way, I think that we've done a great job of that. I have a hard time pointing to many times in our past where these sorts of things have become problematic. Also, probably because of different past things that I've seen on Texas Freemasons, that we have a Grand Master here that lasts a year. So if there's a problem, we have the ability not only to solve it, but it also times itself out. It's not going to be an in perpetuity problem. So as a new Master Mason, who this might be the very first time you've even considered the fact that, what you say on social media might be subject to the review of Brandy here, who's our current Worshipful Master, or the Grand Master, or that you have to think about what you say publicly now. How does that strike you? What are going through your minds as you're hearing this conversation?
One of the major things that I was thinking about whenever Cody was reading that law, how long has that law been on the books? And in the age before social media, what did that even look like? How did that even come about? Because now it's so easy. You can pull out your phone and you can say your opinion and then get a response right away. But I think knowing that law's on the books, it's like there was something that happened before the age of social media that sparked the necessity for it. I think most people should feel a personal responsibility, maybe after a certain age, maybe after some years of experience and maturity, you should feel a personal responsibility even before Freemasonry to represent your family and I guess that group of people the best that you possibly can. And then that should expand out to your job or, and in this case, Freemasonry. I feel like in the past I've said things on social media, probably not the best things, but after maturing and having more experience in life, I realized there is a personal responsibility that you are free to say what you want, but you should be able to regulate yourself. And ultimately, I feel like everybody should be able to do that and make a better decision. It might take experiencing some backlash or whatever consequences that come your way, but I think it extends past Masonry. I think people should think of that before they even think of Masonry in a way.
I remember growing up, one of the things that my dad was really emphatic about whenever I was in elementary school was that, sure, there are rules in school, and you're going to get in trouble, and you're going to break the rules, and you're going to be what every elementary school student is. They're going to push the boundaries. get into arguments, maybe get into fights, as kids are wont to do from time to time. But one of the things that he always emphasized to me, and I appreciate it now as a Freemason, probably now more than ever, certainly more than I did whenever I was an elementary school child, is that he said, whatever you do, however you behave, don't embarrass your mother or me. And he meant that not in a glib way, but he meant it as a way that, like, you are representing us as your mother and father, and if you make us look like bad parents, I am going to beat you within an inch of your life, and you will never want to humiliate us again, because you are an extension of who we are and the kind of parents we are, and we did not raise you to behave like X, Y, or Z, whatever it was I was doing that was probably stupid. And so I think about that now, and I know that I'm the first person to admit, as an opinionated person, I get involved in conversations that I probably shouldn't get involved in on social media. And because it's a terrible venue for conversation anyway, because you don't get to hear the personality, you don't get to hear the tone of voice, you don't get to hear, I assume sometimes that people are being sarcastic when they probably aren't, or people are being mean-spirited when they probably aren't. But I'm also the guy on the other side of that who can dish it out just as much as I can take it. I try to play both sides, but I think that there is something to what you're saying, that we should be thinking about. Not Freemasonry shouldn't necessarily be the place where we think about what we're saying on social media first, that we should be thinking about, how are we representing our wives or our spouses or our children or our parents or our friends and our vocation. And then Freemasonry, just like we talk about with our prospective members, if Freemasonry is number one on your life, then you've got a lot of problems going on, because that means you've put Masonry above your faith, you've put Masonry above your family, you've put Freemasonry above your regular vocation. And if you're thinking about what you're saying on social media because of Freemasonry first, then you have pole vaulted its importance in your life. And sure, I am the first person to say that Freemasonry is important in my life, but come on. I think we all know that all of us have things that have to be more important than Freemasonry.
Oh, absolutely. And the idea that we're talking about here with the responsibility in our free speech when it comes to Masonry is the idea that as a Mason, I may have an opinion, but I also need to think about, first I need to consider what I want to say. And I don't just blurt it out. I need to think about it. I need to be slow to speak. I need to calculate what I want to say if I want it to have an impact. We all know those people in our lives that rarely say things. So when they do say something, it has a deep and severe impact on us. So that's one thing to consider. I think it's too easy for us just to get onto a social media platform and just kind of start spewing without even thinking about what we're having to say. So there's that. The other thing that is for me as a Freemason is I need to consider not only what I'm saying, but will something that I say have an effect on Fort Worth 148? Will it have an effect on my brothers at 148? Will it have an effect on my brothers that are in the 64th district? Is it going to have an effect on people that are, on brothers that are down in Houston or San Antonio or Austin? Those types of things. And I know that a lot of people out there are going, why would I even think about that? But seriously, if we're getting down to the nuts and bolts of this one, what I say when people know that Cody Cox is a Freemason, what I say, they are going to attach not only to Freemasonry, but to my lodge, to people I know. So this idea of free speech with responsibility is what's sticking in my head right now.
One of the things that I really liked about something you said while we were preparing for the episode, Cody, is that if we ever felt like something was we were so incensed about something, that if we said something and it was limited in some way by the Grand Master or our Worshipful Master or whomever, and that they were perpendicular to what we think is morally, ethically, then the question would naturally become, why would I want to be a part of an organization whose values are so contradictory to mine? And so if I ever felt like Freemasonry was sideways to what I think morally and ethically is prescribed by my faith, by my sense of right and wrong, I would have no problem saying what I'm saying on social media and taking whatever repercussions that I have for that, for taking that stand to make the point that I'm trying to make. But I'll also be honest, there's never been a time so far in my Masonic career where the values of Freemasonry were perpendicular to my
Right.
own or anything that I thought was right. I've always seen Freemasonry as being this kind of, I won't say objective moral truth because that's where my faith comes in, but it's so much in alignment with my own personal views of right, wrong, ethics, all of those things that I've never really been sideways with Freemasonry's ethics or even how it's been administrated in the past. I might quibble about some things. We all do. By and large, I've never had a problem with it. And so having the Grand Master having this power, while in a theoretical sense, as an American who values freedoms and liberty and the ability to say whatever I want to say whenever I want to say it, that is still part of who I am. That splinter in the back of my mind is very soothed by the fact that we're choosing wise men to lead us. And even on their worst day, they are likely never going to lead this fraternity to a place where bad things are going to happen.
And we need to be able to place that trust in our elected leaders, especially within the fraternity. And I'm gonna throw this in here. I think then with this conversation as well, this should be something also circumspect where we need to look at ourselves as members in the fraternity and say, this is what I believe about the freedom of speech. Does the person that wants to make themselves available to be either the leader in my lodge, the leader of the Grand Jurisdiction of Texas, or heck, even our newest EA, if I'm going to vote on this person and I know that they're, again, like you were saying, perpendicular to what I believe, then that's where I, as the individual Mason, as a free thinker, should be able to go, you know what, no, I don't have faith in this particular person, and vote that particular way. And know that if the vote doesn't go my way or something like that, I should have the faith in the grand geometrician, in the grand architect of the universe, that he knows what's going on and that things will eventually right themselves. Maybe that's how I soothe myself. Maybe that's how I can rectify this in my mind, the fact that sometimes things do go askew, but eventually the boat is going to right itself.
Absolutely.
Maybe that's simplistic, but that's how I survive sometimes.
I think some people might call that Pollyanna-ish. I would not. I think that it is. I think it's refreshing in a society where we're living right now, where so much of the conversation is about questioning and being suspicious of institutions, that we have this institution that we have called Freemasonry, where there is still a modicum of trust, where such vague legal language can still be yielding such beneficial results in the way that we behave and in our conversation, without having significant problems with how it's being administrative punitively. That's interesting that in this era of anti-establishmentism, that we have this establishment that is so important to us.
Just a point I want to make, the release date on this one would be October 13th. Does that day mean anything to Masons? It should. King Philip IV, King of France, the rest of the Templars, October 13th, 1307. Kind of a big deal. Got to be a little protective of what we say.
Yeah, of course.
It's also my wife's birthday, but
That's probably the more important reason you need to remember.
For me, it is.
That's definitely the most important
Well,
reason.
But happy birthday, Amy, by the way. We're saying it now it is in September right now that this is being recorded.
You can't
but
say that we didn't try.
we have remembered you, Amy, way in advance. So happy birthday,
That's
Amy.
right. And especially after that conversation, I need to think about happy birthday and cake because it's just something that will bring joy
To us little fat boys,
Yeah, exactly.
our bald-bearded fat
Listen,
boys.
I need some ice cream now.
That is going to be a wrap on today's episode. We really appreciate all of our listeners out there taking the time. If you have some comments or you have some opinions about this, feel free to share it. Keep your comments circumspect, as this conversation would recommend, but let us know what you think. Let us know if you have opinions. Let us know how you feel about this theoretical idea that we've tossed around. If you have ideas that you would like to hear us talk about, submit it to us via email, via our website, and comments. We're always here to listen to the listeners and to talk about the things that are important in your life. As we prepare to go off into the world, let us be circumspect in our desires and keep our passions within due bounds. And my name is Evve Kirkendall, and I am signing off.
Brandy Patton, sign off.
This is Cody Cox signing off.
And I'm Zachary Davis signing off.